children. I'm so excited to read to you today. I'm actually going to read you a fairy tale. Now, I know all of you have heard fairy tales, have heard probably many of them, some of the classics like Cinderella and Snow White and Sleeping Beauty and Beauty and the Beast. What I'm going to read to you today, you may not be too familiar with. It's called Puss in Boots. And here is the little pussycat wearing boots. And one of the reasons I like fairy tales, well, actually, two reasons why I like fairy tales. One is that it transports me back to a time far, far away in another world, in another land, and it is so different from the world that we live in now. So that makes me happy. It gives me an escape from the world of today. And the second reason why I really like fairy tales and why I'm going to read you one today is that all fairy tales carry a moral. It teaches us a lesson, it teaches us something that can help us grow and become a better person. This particular story talks about a cat. Now, when we think about a cat, we don't think much about a cat. But what this story teaches us is to never underestimate anyone, no matter who it is. So let's see what this story says. Puss in Boots. There was once a miller who had little to give to his three sons. He was very poor, and when he died, all that remained were his mill, his donkey, and his cat. So, without sending for any lawyers who would have swallowed everything up, the sons shared what was left. The eldest son took the mill, the second the donkey, and the youngest had nothing but the cat. The third son was not very pleased with what he had got. My brothers, he said to himself, have done well. If they get together, they can make a living with a mill and a donkey. But all I can do is eat my cat, make a muff of his skin, and then die of hunger. The cat, who had heard all this, put on a serious face and tried to comfort his master. Good master, do not worry, said the cat. Just give me a bag and a pair of boots so I can scamper through the woods, and I will show you that you are better off than you think. Now, the youngest son had seen the cat do many clever tricks to catch rats and mice, and he noted that the cat was very cunning, so he thought he would see what the cat could do. When the cat was dressed very gallantly in a large pair of boots, and with the bag around his neck, Mr. Pussy set out to try his luck. First, he hid himself in a rabbit warren and soon tricked a silly young bunny into his bag. Then off he went to the king's palace. And when the courtiers asked him what he wanted, he said he was the servant of my lord the Marquis of Carabas, which was the title he gave to the miller's son, and that he had a present for his master for the king. And when he saw that the king was pleased with the rabbit, the cat caught other small animals like hares and partridges and gave them to the king, pretending that they all came from the Marquis of Carabas. The king began to feel very friendly towards this strange nobleman. Now, one day, the cat heard the king and his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the world, were going to take a drive by the riverside. So Pussy went to his master and said, you are in luck today. Just go and wash yourself in the river at such and such place and leave the rest to me. While the miller's son was washing, the king passed by, and the cat began to shout, help! Help! My lord, the Marquis of Carabas is drowning. The king put his head out of the coach, and seeing it was the cat who brought him gifts that called, ordered the royal guards to save the good Marquis of Carabas. As they were dragging the miller's son from the river, Mr. Pussy, who had given his master's clothes, explained to the king that a band of robbers had stripped the Marquis and thrown him naked into the river. The king was very sorry to hear it, and at once offered the young man the finest clothes from his own wardrobe. And when the miller's son was dressed in these rich clothes, he looked every inch a marquis, And the princess looked on him tenderly and fell in love. As soon as the miller's son was dressed and ready, he got into the coach and began to ride slowly back to the palace with the king and the princess. The cat hurried on in front, and when he saw some mowers working in the fields, he called to them and said, "Good people, if the king asks you, tell him this meadow belongs to the Marquis of Carabas. Do this, or I'll have you chopped as small as herbs for the pot." The Moors were so frightened by the cat's fierce face that they did as they were told, and the cat, hurrying on before, ordered the reapers and the plowmen and the woodcutters to do the same. The king was amazed by the great lands owned by the Marquis, and here's the cat ordering everybody around. Now, the lands they were passing through really belonged to a rich ogre who lived in a castle nearby. The cat, who knew all well about the ogre, called at the castle door and said, very politely, that he had heard so many great things, but he could hardly believe that the ogre had such wonderful magical powers. "Can you, for example," said the cat, "turn yourself into an elephant or a lion?" "Easy," said the ogre, and the next moment there was a lion on the floor of the castle, roaring and growling. The cat was so frightened he climbed up the gutter and took to the roof, stumbling about in his great boots that were not made for walking on the tiles. After a while the ogre changed back into his own form, and the cat came panting down from the roof. "Well," said cunning Mr. Pussy, "that was very fine, but a large animal is one thing, and small one is another. Now to change into a mouse, I should think that's impossible." "Impossible!" cried the ogre. "Why, it's the simplest thing in the world." And in the blink of an eye there was a mouse scampering about the floor. With a leap, the cat pounced on the mouse and gobbled it up. Here's the mouse here's the cat gobbling up the mouse that the ogre had turned himself into. Meanwhile, the coach with the king and the princess and the miller's son came to the castle, and the king decided to pay a visit. Surely some great lord must be the owner of such a grand castle. The coach rolled up to the castle door, and waiting there was the cat. "Your Majesty is welcome," he said, sweeping off his hat and bowing low. "Welcome to the castle of my lord, the Marquis of Carabas." "What?" cried the king, turning to the miller's son. "Is this yours as well? Not only the lands and fields and woods, but this wonderful building also? Well, my lord, let us go in." The miller's son gave his hand to the princess, and they went in after the king, and inside they found waiting for them a great feast, which the ogre had been preparing for his friends before the cat brought his life to a sudden end. Now the king was quite charmed with the fine things that belonged to the Marquis of Carabas, and the princess was more and more in love with the handsome young man each moment. And when the king had drunk 5 or 6 glasses of wine, he turned to the miller's son and said, "My lord Marquis, if you don't become my son-in-law, it will be your own fault, because you can see that my daughter is only too happy to marry you." So the miller's youngest son, who had set out from home with nothing but his father's cat, bowed low and married the princess that same day. And the cat became a most important person in the court and never had to run after mice anymore, except for fun. Thank you. I had so much fun reading to you, and I look forward to reading to you again, hopefully in person next time. Take care. Bye bye.